it's not easy to unpack those boxes that you've packed away, because
Yeah.
we did have tons of squabbles, small, large, over the years, but we always kind of kissed and made up at the end. Like, we never would take the baggage on stage with us.
Yeah.
That was really critical about it. And then you pack it away as you do, because we're not super big on holding grudges with each other, because we always remind ourselves that we were brothers first and foremost.
How are you?
Great, Tom. Thanks for having us back.
Congratulations on the opening. How did it? I'll go to Mike. How did it feel to have that thing open TIFF yesterday?
It was extraordinary, Tom.
Yeah,
the full house at the Royal Alex, and that was the first time. Though I've seen it a couple of hundred times, but to see it with all those people in the seats, feel the emotion, hear the laughter, a few sniffles. Yeah, it was an extraordinary experience.
And plus, the Prime Minister showed up, Gord. That's pretty good, hey?
Yeah, it was really nice. We've known the Prime Minister for quite a while, going back to Bourbon Street North and Club Soda in Montreal. And he's done very well for himself. But yeah, it was just great to get reconnected with him, and nice to take time out of his very busy schedule.
Not just, to be in it as well. I thought that was beautiful that he was in it as well. So one of the things I can't get over is how much stuff exists of this band. So Johnny, I wanted to ask you, who is the documentarian in the band? Who was the person in the band that was keeping all these flyers and all these videos and all that stuff?
Well, they kind of lived everywhere, to be honest. When we were putting stuff together, everyone kind of had a drawer full of tapes and videotapes and things like that. I found one of Gord's very old friends from Queens, a guy by the name of Mark Williams. He shot some stuff on Super 8, and it ended up at my mom's house. And the reason it ended up there, it was directed by Gord Downie, shot by Mark Williams, but it ended up at my mom's house because she had a projector. Everyone had the everyone had the handhelds, but my mom had a projector. So we found this stuff. I gave it to Mike, and it kind of came together like that. I wouldn't say it's one guy in particular for, we're kind of...
There's no one hoarder in the band?
Well, I think we all are. I think that's what helped.
I think we all got our tickle trunks.
I'm glad you opened them up. Mike, though, in order for you to make this, it struck me that you had to open up journals, diaries, things of your late brother in order to get this film made and to tell this story. What was that like for you?
Well, you probably know that Gord was just a lifelong note taker. So he always had a moleskin in his jean jacket pocket or his back pocket. Before that, there were other little books that he had to write things down. And there are 70 or 80, maybe more, of these little books. And Gord was just jotting these little moments of life down, often when they're, on tour. And Gord, Sinclair describes very well in the documentary how some of those little snippets make their way into songs.
Yeah.
But while I was going through them, they weren't diaries. There was a few times he would sort of start writing in diary form, but it was pretty rare. And mostly it was just these little moments. But you're kind of playing detective. So, you're reading, and you're looking at the rough handwriting. You're like, I think he's in a car. Yeah. And then there's a reference to a taxi driver, and you're like, oh, shit, he's in a taxi. And I'm like, I think he's in New Orleans. But he's not, it's not meant for, it's meant for, these little fragments. It's not really meant to give you a clear picture. So you got to sort of feel around. But it was great to just go through those and I don't know if I learned more about my brother, but I really, Gord was just so dutiful about these kind of things. So, he's not the kind of guy who would, at some point stop, for 6 months or whatever. It just kept doing it. And so that was great. You kind of feel, I don't want to stretch it by saying I kind of felt a little bit inside his head, but you can definitely see that the kind of things that were sort of occurring to him. And, the kind of, I think, if you look at that, that is almost by definition living in the moment. Like you're making that moment. You're trying to capture it. You're trying to hang on to it. And that's pretty cool. So, yeah, going through Gordy's books was just a treat.
Gord, there's a lot of footage of you guys in the van early on. And I was joking around with you a little bit about saying that when me and my friends were talking about the show, we've all been in vans, we said about the Tragically Hip, they're mortal. They're like us.
Absolutely.
They've also been in bad hotels in, Port Coquitlam. But who had the foresight to be filming those early van experiences? Did you know one of these things was going to be made?
A lot of the footage, the van footage, was actually from the early 90s. We were on tour with Eric Johnson all across the States, and they had an equipment truck. So this was the first time that we could actually put our gear, amps, drums, guitars and stuff in their equipment trunk. So we had the luxury of putting a mattress in the back where the gear would normally go. So we would take turns. Paul and I would have done most of the driving, but the guys would be lounging in the back, reading the newspaper and stuff. And at that time, Sean Valentini and Pete Henderson were traveling around with sort of documenting the early part of our career.
Just for fun, or just for...
Yeah, it was Don Allen Revolver Films, right? And it was focused around a charity show. The same thing, right? We were going to doing at Fort Henry fundraiser that we were going to put on film, and it was all going to be part of a documentary series. And we were just, again, it's just the stuff that you stumble on. We kind of remember doing, and so like Johnny was saying earlier, the process of piecing all this together and finding all this lost, never seen footage. It was great. It was a real mystery.
Johnny, what was it like to see the band in those young years? This band playing bars in Kingston. A member I didn't know about who played the saxophone.
That's right.
What was it like to look back on that young band?
We kind of exhausted ourselves in Kingston at the Lakeview Manor and the Terrapin Tavern and the Polish Hall. And, we were doing 3 nights, and Robbie was booking us, and it was time to get out. But the thing that I really take away from that early footage, which is cool, is how much fun we were having.
Yeah.
When you're in a band, you're really in a gang, as Bono says. You really are, and you're pretty unstoppable when you're together, and you commit to each other, and that's what we did. Being in a band is like. So it's like you're all hopping in the van, and Gord's beautiful mom bought us that van, and we had some good laughs in that. I cherish those days.
The maiden voyage of that first van, we were going up into the Ottawa Valley to play in Pembroke, maybe Renfrew. And
it was Renfrew,
and we blew the engine on the maiden voyage. And so it was like the 3-set sort of scene. You remember those days. And every nickel that we made went to put a new engine in this van. And it was,
Were there things that you saw in the making of this film that you forgot about? Were there surprises to you?
Yeah, there were. It is funny how it all comes flooding back, though. The memories, they get foggy with
like
time.
What? Like what?
It's the larger things, right? Like we've been saying constantly throughout, like the 2 hours that you're on stage every night. That's the fun part. But the real work is like the footage of us doing our laundry at the laundromat, the real glamour stuff. Yeah. You're literally sitting there in your only clean pair of underwear that you have left, watching the thing turn around. And it does take you back to those first voyages. You know what it's like. Like you're not really a band until you've done the van drive to get out of Ontario for the first time. If you can survive that, you can survive just about anything.
Yeah, a friend of mine said that more bands have broken up on the stretch between Toronto and Thunder Bay than any other stretch of highway in the entire world. Yeah, that's the killer.
I had forgotten about the Sam the Record Man thing completely.
What was that for people who haven't seen it yet?
We bought our records from Sam the Record Man, and then we were given this opportunity to be front racked in Tower Records around the world, and it's just like a little blip in our 40 years, but Gord was like, I buy my records at Sam the Record Man. And in the day, I remember we were coming down from Kingston, and we were front racked on Yonge Street in Toronto. That's heavy bananas.
Yeah.
And they believed in you. If they believed you were a career band, then Sam the Record Man front racked you. And that's what it was for us. And then this other thing, this brass ring, just, to Gord was like, well, we can't do that.
Right. You had forgotten about that.
I'd completely forgotten about it because all along the way, if we had any little arguments about things, I think we were arguing about artistic things like that. Like, somebody sees a faster route somewhere, and Gord always wanted, he was always, no, we got to do this. And it's funny because Mike and I have talked about, Gord's business decisions were very artistic.
Yeah.
And that's incredible because he really didn't care about money at all. He was, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. But Mike, I guess what was it like to see this footage and start telling the story of your brother and just when he wasn't around? Like you had to tell this story of what he was up to when you were at, when everyone else was at home and the family was, where's Gord? Somewhere, and you got to see what he was doing?
Yeah. I think the whole process, in making this documentary was making sure that, Gord, we were finding Gord's voice, so we were able to find that in a lot of ways. And, I really think that, we have this, my brother Patrick and I have this kind of rule because in different situations, the Downie Wenjack Fund or something else, sort of like, well, what would Gord think? What would Gord want? And we have a sort of an inside joke, which is like, well, whatever it is, there's a good chance he would have changed his mind the next day. so I don't know if we should go too far down this road about making decisions based, because Gord was, he a lot of these things, he, as Johnny said, the artist in him wouldn't rest. So these things had to be examined from multiple, vantage points.
But that's not easy for you as a filmmaker, because at the same time that you're his brother, you're the filmmaker of this thing and the storyteller. And I don't mean to be indelicate, but there are moments where the band's not getting along.
Oh, 100%.
And there are moments where the band's not getting along, and it's sort of everyone's a little bit, as we say back home, a bit crooked with Gord. Mm-hmm. And George Stroumboulopoulos says this great thing in the film where he says it was a secret in Canada that a lot of people knew, but no one wanted to talk about, which was that the members of the Tragically Hip didn't always get along.
Yeah, right.
How did you, as both the brother of the man, a friend of the band, but also an objective, somewhat objective filmmaker, approach that part of it?
Well, really, to get the story from as many sources as we could. We're not going to hear Gord's version of it exactly. But I also think that, as you watch the documentary and you see where these, tensions are arising from, they're arising from, these aren't world events. They're differences of opinion in the creative process.
Yeah.
And what I hope is in there is the complexity of being with other adults, making decisions and carving out, a living for yourself. If you look at the film, the whole 4 hours, there's really two parts. There's the initial euphoric, youthful, exuberant phase. That's in the van that we've been talking about.
The rise. Unbelievable rise.
And it goes all the way through episode 2. It just keeps getting better and better and better. And then, and I really felt it in the theater yesterday, and then there's a turn. And that turn is not, now they're not getting along as well. It's adulthood. There are parents. There are, enough years gone by. And I really feel like what we're sort of showing, that those tensions and things are really the complexity of adult life. Nothing will ever be quite that simple again. And that's okay. Like, you're not right and I'm not wrong. It's just that before we were just the Five Musketeers, and you saw it. You saw it, in all those different places. So I really feel like when we're getting into that phase of it, when band members weren't all in agreement, Gord, wanted to take on a solo project, and that what I really see is the complexity of staying together in this group that was formed as youth and are now 5 adults still trying to chart that course.
Beautifully said. Johnny, ring true, like I could only imagine it might be hard to, it's one thing to watch your fun music videos and watch the New Orleans Sinking music video and watch 60,000 people come to see you. And I think it was Markham, like 60,000 people came to see you.
Our biggest gig in Canada, really.
Like
biggest paying gig.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine seeing some of those. I mean, the making of We Are the Same. I know there was, conversations around people doing, you guys showing up to do background vocals. The background vocals were already done by the time you got there. I'll just offer, it couldn't have been easy to watch some of that stuff in the doc.
But all part of the warts and all, and part of going through it. Again, I don't think this stuff would be revealed. We're 5 very private people. As I was saying earlier in another interview, that there's a real mystique about Gord. Even Paula Downie said to me one day, we were just having a cup of tea, and she said, "What was my brother like on the road? Like, what did he do?" Yeah. And I said, well, he woke up, he loved coffee, and then he wrote feverishly, and his words tortured him the older he got, and but he got through it, and he loved being on the road, but he would also do the work, and he got this from Lorna and Edgar, his work ethic, and then he became a dad. As soon as that tour was over, he was a dad, and he was there for 3 weeks doing it, and then he'd go back on the road. So those little portions really will kind of always stick with me, but
Yeah, it's the part of the warts and all thing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, very much so. And hats off to Mike, because he had the courtesy and the love, because we've known Mike since we've known Gord, and we discussed it beforehand that this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to give the complete picture, and before we got into heavy bananas conversations like that, we would talk about it. Are you cool to talk about it? And obviously, and it's not easy to unpack those boxes that you've packed away, because we did have tons of squabbles, small, large, over the years, but we always kind of kissed and made up at the end. Like, we never would take the baggage on stage with us. And that was really critical about it. And then you pack it away as you do, because we're not super big on holding grudges with each other, because we always remind ourselves that we were brothers first and foremost.
I had always wondered, and I'm happy you told this story, I had spent a lot of my time wondering why Gord said we're tragically hip on SNL.
And now the truth is, the truth comes out.
I always thought it was because Dan Aykroyd had said from Kingston, Ontario, the Tragically Hip. Yeah. And Tragically Hip is the first thing he heard, and he kind of startled himself.
Yeah.
Is that?
I think it was it Dan, or it was maybe Don Pardo had said.
No, or John Goodman was
Tragically Hip, but we were. Yeah. We were fairly relaxed when we were going on.
It's legal now. You can say it. You don't have to use. Right. This isn't the '90s. You don't have to use euphemisms. You were relaxed.
We were all gathered around the air vent in the green room.
You would use a little. Back when we called it laser lettuce.
Right. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but in retrospect, it actually it was sort of beautiful. It was really a happy accident, because it's actually a fantastic opening line for the song. And it's a great opening line for that show in particular, kind of our introduction to mainstream American culture.
Yeah, that was the opening line of Woodstock too, right? He said, we're tragically hip at Woodstock
we used
as well.
Probably 90% of the time, that was the opening line of the song ever since.
Last time I talked to you guys, we talked a little bit about the tour. I mean, so that as Mike said, the story is in sort of 2 parts. The sort of kids in a van, the dream coming true. A band forming in a basement, playing bars, writing original songs, it hitting, getting signed, the dream coming true. As Mike said, adulthood sets in around the 3rd episode. And then, of course, in the 4th episode, it concerns Gord's diagnosis, and then the final tour. And I asked you last time, I'll say this to Gord and Johnny, what it was like to be on that final tour. And you said some version of, well, we were there. Like, we were living it. We can't give you too much perspective, but we were in it. Watching this has managed to give you a little bit of perspective of what maybe it was like for other Canadians to be there, how it was being watched all over the country, the experience people were having, watching yourself on stage. I'd just love to hear some reflections on you about what you saw when you saw that final tour on screen.
Yeah, it was amazing. We were so caught up in the moment, just the day-to-day, the travel, making sure that Gord was in a good space, in a healthy space. We were all very concerned going in about his health first and foremost. Then you step back, and people were reaching out over the course of the tour, and we were people were engaged. But when you see the viewing parties that people were having everywhere, and certainly that last show, our town square in Little Kingston, Ontario, filling up with people just to watch it on a big screen. I swear, I've said it so many times, and I say it in the film, but I'll say it again. As the tour wore along, it was the love that we were feeling from the audience. Like that live performance, as you well know, it's a symbiotic relationship between you and the audience, and what we were getting back from playing the songs was just unbelievable. Gord, as everyone knew, had brain surgery, and his memory was not what it was, and he would stumble on lyrics, and people would pick up the vocal for him and sing it back to him, and he'd find a spot, and off we would go again. And it was just to me, it speaks to the power of music, and just how very fortunate we were to have that connection with the people in this country. It was great.
Johnny, I'm happy you got to see it. I'm happy you got to sit in a theater and actually see what we saw.
My kids were there, and I got up at one point to leave, and I was happy to leave because I still haven't seen the whole thing through, because it was very emotional seeing a picture of our moms and dads, and some of them are gone.
Yeah,
and
that beautiful picture of all of them together.
Yeah.
Whoever took that photo, what a beautiful...
That was Jack Chang.
Yeah, beautiful moment.
And he took that, and there was a very nice piece in the Kingston Whig Standard, because, when we started out, it's kind of... you weren't singing it from the rooftops. Our son wants to be a musician. He's going to go on the road. Isn't it great?
He's leaving grad school.
Yeah, and there was actually a Scottish guy who lived down the road from my mom and dad, and he'd come over and he had some drinks, and he said, "What'll Tragically Hip do when they're dead in the water?" And my mom took great offense to this, and it's true. And he was an engineer at Queen's University, and she said, "He's going to buy your house and he's going to knock it down and make a tennis court."
And you did.
Those parents, that picture, they're all angels. They supported us and they gave it to us. They a van or the support. So when I saw that, I had to get up and leave. Very emotional.
Mike, I would argue with you that the film's in two parts. I think the film's almost in three. There's the ascendancy, there's the adulthood, and then I find towards the end of the fourth episode, it becomes about your family, and how when Gord got sick, your family really took care of him, and all of a sudden, I saw you in the film a little bit, just a little bit more than I had up until that point. What was it like bringing your own family into the film at that point?
Well, really important. I mean, it was one of the ways that we were, filling in that empty chair at the dinner table of Gord's to have, his siblings and his mom, helping, get that across. But I would say to you, Tom, family is the whole film. It is the whole message of the film. And the brotherhood is included. The brotherhood of the 5 members of the Hip are included in that family. And, I really feel like when you look at it, it starts with this really tiny circle of these 5 guys, and you kind of know how they got there. And then you see this other ring, and it's the 10 parents, and that next ring. And it keeps growing throughout the whole piece until we get to the nationally televised final performance on August 20th, 2016. And that family is now half of Canada, who are literally, hands linked, watching this final performance, saying goodbye to a part of themselves that they know they're never going to quite be in touch with again. And that's kind of what I hope, certainly for like outside of Canada, not just the people that aren't familiar with the band, but the people that have a sort of a curiosity at all. I hope they see that. I hope they see that this band from this little town in Ontario, this little town called Kingston with all these prisons, strangely. Somehow these concentric circles keep growing till the whole country feels that they're a part of the same, the same moment. That's family.
Beautifully said. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed watching the series. I watched it over 2 days, but I wish I had watched it all at once. And it's lovely to see you guys again. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank
for
you,
having us.
Tom. I'm stealing a mug, by the way.
They're all yours. Once you're in the Order of Canada world, you can just take whatever you want from the
thank you.
CBC. You know, you can smoke in here too.
They're beautiful.
The Peter Zosky rule.